Hey guys, how's it going? And happy Friday. I hope y'all are doing good. Well, will we avert major gun and 2A denials in Michigan? It appears so. And this is dovetailing off of what I talked about in my live stream a week ago. And I was going to do a video. And I'm kind of glad I didn't. But we're not out of the woods yet. So we need to talk about this anyways. So there was a major chance, which seemed inevitable at the time, that, yeah, it was going to be a pretty tough go for a lot of people to be able to get a gun, a CPL, hunting licenses, and all these things for possibly a brief period of time, possibly a long period of time here in Michigan. This has to do with the budget. All right. We're going to talk all about that because there's supposedly a tentative agreement to avert a Michigan government shutdown. However, as of a week ago, it was considered to be inevitable. Like they were going to shut down the government in Michigan per se due to the lack of having a budget. And from what I was understanding from inside sources that would know, like literally there were government employees, they were going around telling them, yeah, kind of save up your money because you might not be getting paychecks for a long time. They were going to lay off much of the state of Michigan. And again, I want to emphasize, we're not out of the woods yet. But it was this fine line because there was the potential, and there still is actually a chance of some major stuff happening. Now, nobody's been talking about this when it comes to the 2A. But here's kind of the thing, and this is where it's tough sometimes. I like to report what's going on with nationwide events going on in the state of Michigan, which is where I live. And for anyone that lives in Pennsylvania, I'm going to talk about you guys a little bit tonight too, and what's going on there and how much it's very scarily mirroring what's recently happened in Michigan. But it's a fine line between putting something out there, being like, look, the sky's falling, put some shocking title where everyone's going to freak out. Your video get tons of views, and that's what most gun tubers do, quite frankly. That's probably why this channel's not particularly successful and hasn't really grown in size for a long time. But there's that versus, like, you don't want to fearmonger people, right? And here's the unfortunate part. This is just the way the world is, I guess, or at least the world of the internet is. When there is something that's like hyper sensational and including up to maybe it's real or it's fear mongering, stuff that's driving people crazy that they're either super scared of or super mad at, that does tend to get the most views. It always has. And we've put out shocking stories on this channel many times before that get tons of views instantly. People love watching it. Now, they might not like watching it, but they love clicking on it to see what's going to happen. Well, I wanted to put out a video letting you guys know of something that seems probable, and now it's no longer probable, but it's still possible. You see the difference here? That could be pretty wide-reaching in Michigan regarding the ability to get guns, other infringements on the Second Amendment. But I wanted to let you guys know insofar as just to give you the heads up so nobody got caught with their pants down. Now, we had somebody in here last week, and hopefully he's back in the chat again tonight. I'll recognize him if I see it. I think Mike Hammond is his name. Was talking about how he had just taken his CPL class. There he is, Mike Hammond. See, I have a good memory. And I was like, man, is this state really going to shut down? And at that time last week, I was pretty much certain it was going to. But I wasn't 100% sure because, see, this has been ongoing. Lots of this and that, people posturing on both sides of the aisle. But if you remember, I'm like, you might want to get that CPL soon. So here's the scenario. Michigan right now is actually months behind, and they were supposed to pass their annual budget. This is what funds the whole state of Michigan's government. Keep in mind, when it comes to state governments, they're a lot different than the federal government in many ways, but one way that's specifically germane to this is the fact that states can't print their own money. Now, they can do stuff with bonds, and there is stuff they can do-ish, but they can't just out and out print their own money. Like if you remember the big stimulus checks that were going out 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, there were like trillions of dollars instantly shoved into the economy. People had extra spending money. But the problem is during that time period, during the Kung Flu era, we had printed more money in that year than we had like ever before. And I can't remember the stat because it's been a long time ago now, but like overnight, we introduced like 25% of all the currency in circulation into the economy. Well, that tends to lead to inflation. I'm not an economist, but now look at the price of everything, right? Well, states can't do that how the federal government can. So at the end of the day, if there's not a budget being passed and they can't just print fiat currency out of thin air, then there's no money. So they can't actually pay people's paychecks. Now, they can do certain things and there's certain procedures. We're going to get into those in a minute. But we were getting down to where literally as of 48 hours ago, there was a complete stalemate because the House has to pass a budget. The Senate has to pass a budget. Then they have to put it in layman's terms, reconcile their differences and present a unified budget that the House and Senate can agree upon, send it to the governor, and then she has to agree whether she wants to sign it or not. Now we have what's called a split legislature in Michigan, meaning the House is controlled by Republicans with a fairly narrow majority, but a super one vote narrow majority, like I don't mean super majority, I mean an extremely narrow majority. The Democrats do hold the Senate. One vote. If they would hold that special election, because there's literally like hundreds of thousands of people in Michigan that have no senator right now at all. Did you know that? Yeah. There's literally a Democrat senator in a district that was trending more to the right. Many people say Republicans could take that district, ran for Congress and won, vacated the seat, is now in Washington, D.C. And here we go with 300 and some odd thousand Michiganians with no senator. The governor won't hold the special election because a lot of experts say that it might go to the Republicans. Then they would have a tie in the Senate, changing everything. So that's where we sit. They've apparently come to an agreement, but I'm going to get into that in 1 second and still tell you the things that almost just happened affecting the Second Amendment and guns and what still could happen, because I want to emphasize one more time. It's less likely than it was just 24 hours, 48 hours ago. It's still possible. I'm not telling anyone to freak out because now it's possible rather than probable. But before we get into all that, I want to thank all of you for the many ways you help support the channel. Thank you to my YouTube channel members. I see a lot of you guys in the chat right now. I definitely appreciate all of your support. Thank you to those of you who leave super chats. Look, I'm not doing any ad reads. I'm just thanking the people that fiscally help keep this going. So thank you to all of you. And if we do reach 5 super chats here within the next hour or so, I will do a live Q&A for everybody else for a little bit. If not, that's all good. And we'll just go hang out somewhere else after about an hour here. And I want to thank all my Patreon supporters as well as my local supporters. Now, Locals is a different site, censorship free. So definitely check it out there. Extra content that you're not going to see here. And also follow 28EDU on X. And check out the links down there in the description. So this was just announced last night. Let me pull this up real quick here. Now, keep in mind, literally as recently as like a week ago and all the way up till last night, I was at Cedar Point hanging out with my family. And I didn't get to read this stuff actually till this morning. They were in gridlock. They were saying there is no way possible that they were going to be able to get this budget figured out. Well, the line in the sand is, and this is still the line in the sand, and they still have not passed a budget yet. So everything I'm about to warn you of almost happened, but still could, is September 30th at 11:59 p.m. So that's Tuesday night. As soon as the clock would strike midnight on October 1st, large, massive portions of the Michigan government would be shut down. Essentially, almost all of it. Now, they say they have an agreement. I will share this first, and then I'm going to talk about the bullet that we maybe barely dodged here. But I have to just say this because I'm trying to be responsible about this. Like I said, I already gave up like a viral video because if I would have done this like a week ago, I'd have been like, dude, this is going to happen. But it ain't over till the fat lady sings. And as much as they were saying there was no way the Senate and the House were going to reconcile with each other, I was getting some hints that they might have been getting ready to do that. So this is Bridge, Michigan. This is, in my opinion, they say it's nonpartisan, nonprofit news source. I found them to be on the left side of things. This is mainstream local media, so we're just going to briefly go over what they have to say. And I doubt they'll blame it on Democrats. I was actually going to blame this one on the Democrats if it happened. Now, look, we cut Republicans no slack whatsoever on this channel. Kind of annoyed by the fact I just did a recent video that they're trying to pass through this bill in the House that'll put a website out about Michigan CPL reciprocity with other states to include a QR code on the CPL. Yeah, if you haven't seen that video, definitely check it out. But this one here, look, the Republicans had a budget passed that would reduce the budget by about $5 billion. I think my figures are correct here that the Senate wants to raise it about $8 billion. So for once, we actually saw the Republicans slashing the budget, getting rid of lots of wasteful spending, unnecessary government programs, including defunding that tip hotline. Remember, we talked about that on this channel. In a previous budget, and right now it's still being budgeted for, there's a tip hotline where students, kids, as this is promulgated through the schools, can call on their parents if they believe the firearms aren't being stored properly within the home. So different than red flag laws, but kind of another type of red flag, if you will, where if the kid doesn't think, or based on what the school brainwashed them on how firearms are supposed to be stored within the home, which I do now have. I just got this tonight. I'm getting some information from at least one local school district. They are sending that flyer out to parents saying this is how, or to students and parents saying this is how guns should be stored within the home. There was a tip hotline that was established where students could rat out the parents to potentially get the guns confiscated from the home and or criminal penalties for the parents. That has been defunded as of right now in the House approved version. Now they're going to compromise. I hope that still stays gone. But we're going to have to see what they actually agree on so that they can get this budget passed. So, and this has to do with the Second Amendment. Some of you are like, whoa, wait a minute. Why is he talking about budgets? Nope. There still may be and was very likely going to be some major Second Amendment implications here. Whitmer, legislative leaders. Michigan budget deal will avert government shutdown. This was just put out on the 25th, and I would note like late at night on the 25th is when this came out. Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Democratic Senate Majority Leader Winnie Brinks, and Republican House Speaker Matt Hall on Thursday announced a tentative budget deal for the state and schools has been reached and will include dedicated long-term funding for road repairs as well. So supposedly they have a tentative agreement where they're not going to shut it down. This is tentative, though. We have to look at the way this is worded. There's still plenty of time for this stuff to fall apart, and there's not much time for them to get all this together. They only have like 3 days. Full details are not yet known, see? But plan will include new funding for Michigan roads. State lawmakers still need to pass this. So keep in mind, if they have to compromise too much with the Democrats, I know of a few Michigan House members, for example, that are Republicans that ain't going to vote on it anymore if it becomes too fiscally liberal or if it's funding things that they don't think is in the best interest of their constituents in the state of Michigan. So there still has to be votes. Whitmer still must sign the state budget. So this still has to be passed by both chambers of the Michigan legislature, and Whitmer has to sign it before October 1st to avoid a government shutdown. Now, this article is going to go into some of the stuff they're arguing about. Second Amendment isn't really worded here because the Second Amendment is never like the top issue, unless you're Second Amendment supporter. And sometimes I wonder if it's even a top issue for Second Amendment supporters, because there's lots of times when there's something crazy going on. And I'm like, everybody call their reps, call their senators. The other side's calling. The other side, more of them are calling than us. Make our voices heard. And then I'll talk to people I know in Lansing, and they'll be like, yeah, there were a couple calls. 20, 30 people show up to a 2A event, a rally, sometimes more than that. But like at the Capitol, and maybe reps are like, yeah, we got 5 or 10 calls. So I don't know. I don't know who cares about the Second Amendment anymore. I know a good portion of my viewers do, but the public at large, they're more worried about things like free lunches. Yeah, they're planning on giving free lunches to all students in Michigan. Are you familiar with that? All students, not just poor students, but you can chime in if you have opinions on that. Some people would say, well, we need to feed the poor kids because they could be at home hungry. And some of you may be on board with that. But then there's other people that will be like, dude, that's not fiscally conservative. I shouldn't have to buy another kid's lunch, even if they're a poor kid. No, this is no longer that. That's the old argument. Now what they're looking to do, and it seems inevitably they will, fund free lunches for all students. So you could be scrounging yourself together your 40, 50 grand a year, which is very difficult for a family of 4. Let's just say there's you, your wife, and 2 kids. Like literally, if you make $20 an hour, that's 40 grand. If you and your wife both work and you're making $10 an hour, that's 40 grand. So that's not much money right now at all. Not in this day and age, clearly. And you could have to be chipping in with your tax dollar, which we're taxed to no end, right? To pay for a multi-millionaire's kid's lunch. Just keep that in mind. Now it's free lunches for everybody. That's a major issue. It's talked about 1,000 times more than the Second Amendment. The other thing is what Gretchen's been running on for the past 7 years, I guess. That's how long she's been in office. Think about it. Almost 7 years. Fix the dang roads, but she uses the word. She cusses like a sailor. First of all, I don't think, let me just ask you guys' opinion on this. First of all, I don't like the idea of a woman governor. I know that's not politically correct, whatever. But here's the thing. The patriotic women I know, the conservative women I know tend to actually agree with me. That's the thing. But even if they don't agree with me, like whatever. But here's what it really comes down to. We shouldn't even have a woman governor. But if we were to have one, which I don't accept the premise, but we do, this woman doesn't even act ladylike at all. Swears like a sailor. Now look, chicks cuss in real life. I get it. But wouldn't it be nice to have a nice, man in office for governor? Wouldn't that actually be nice for once? But even if we couldn't have that and we had a woman, wouldn't it be nice if she could act a little bit ladylike? Being the chief executive of the whole state. No, these people are complete trash, in my opinion. And she cusses like a sailor. And people that knew her when she was younger say all sorts of things. And I'm just trying to keep this very family friendly. That's where she gets a lot of her nicknames from. Okay. So look, there's good women out there, but here's the problem. When you have people like this governor, this attorney general, it's like, no, we need a man to be the governor of Michigan and come in there and fix a lot of stuff. So she wants to fix the dang roads, but she doesn't say it quite so politely like we do here on this channel. And these are the big things they're talking about right now. And yeah, the roads are riddled with potholes, and they took all the Kung Flu money and put that into road projects. But the problem is, if you watch how these government roads are, there's 2 seasons in Michigan. There's winter and there's construction season. And then like 3 years later, they're like tearing it out and redoing it again. Usually it's like a month after they do it. You guys know what I'm talking about. If you live in Michigan, at least the southeastern portion, they'll have the road closed down for a year. Just mayhem, just trying to get through. You're trying to commute. You're trying to whatever. You can barely even get through these roads. And then there's this beautiful concrete road. And you're like, wow, look at this. Finally, after a year, I get to drive on a smooth road. 2 weeks later, just think about this. And shout out to all my construction worker friends. I have friends in the trades that work on road crews. It ain't about you guys, okay? It's about what's mandated and just the way they do all this stuff in this state. It's way above your head. So I'm not knocking on the regular old guys with calluses on their hands and dirt under their nails out there working their butts off. I'm there with you guys. But let's just say these roads are a disaster. So you're finally just kind of grin to yourself, right? You know, because it's good to be happy when you can. And you're like, wow, I'm driving on this nice road and it's perfectly smooth. And then 2 weeks later, the construction barrels come out and you're like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. So why is there construction barrels out? And you guys know this. Just chime in, because if you live around here, they don't even do this in other states. I've traveled in the South. You'll never see this. It's just like in Michigan. Beautiful concrete road. Are we on the same page? Check. Then like they'll bring it back out and close off 2 lanes again. Then they bring in the big old concrete saws, the big walk behind K saws with like 36 or even 48-inch diamond blades. These blades cost many thousands of dollars, sometimes 10 grand for one blade. And they start cutting these swaths out of the road. The road was just finished after being on construction for a year. We're on the same page, right? I'm trying to make this a good time tonight, but it literally makes you want to pull your hair out. The road was perfect for 2 weeks. Then they cut these swaths of it out. They're like 3-4 foot wide, and they cut them all the way out. They jackhammer all the concrete out. The concrete was barely even dry. You know what I mean? And these aren't relief cuts I'm talking about. They cut like this whole section out. Then they come back in to do a re-pour. And they do this like once every 50 feet for miles. Instantly, the road was nice for exactly 2 weeks. And now you're back to ba-boom, 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 ba-boom. And then it snows in Michigan. And then they salt the roads. And then they plow the roads. And the salt gets the top of it kind of crumbly, right? And pitted. Then the plow catches on the lip where they had just cut these swaths out of the road. Yeah. This is all she cares about. This is all she cares about. This woman in Lansing is the roads, the roads, the roads. Well, they've supposedly come to an agreement. Their big deal is they want a free lunch for everybody. Their big deal is they want to... Look, let's just call a spade, and then we're going to get to the Second Amendment ramifications if they can't get this budget passed, and if they do, the stuff that was narrowly averted. Deborah says, maybe the state could compress all the wasted free school lunches into road materials. No, that's actually kind of funny. You laugh, right? But here's the thing. They probably actually could. Maybe they would be better road materials at the end of the day. And here's the problem. You look at these lunches, very rarely are they nutritious. I mean, this stuff's like bottom of the barrel food. You might put some of this stuff they're feeding kids into the old hog trough, but then you're like, whoa, I actually care about my hog and would rather feed my hog better because I'd like nice, nutritious bacon and ham and pork loin, right? No, these, the roads, the lunches. This is socialism, no matter what. Getting closer to communism every day with this type of stuff. And here's the crazy part. Now, I'm not saying every last Republican in Lansing agrees, but the consensus of the Republicans, which do have the majority of the House, agree with this free lunches for everybody. Because that is one thing they're all agreeing on right now. Now, I'm not saying not every last legislature. One of you might say, well, hold on a minute. You might, my rep doesn't. There might be one or two that don't. But the consensus is all of them on both sides of the aisle think everyone should have to pay for everybody's lunch. Now, I do believe in love and I do believe in charity. The Bible talks about that. I think that's very important, but that should, in my opinion, be more like if I see somebody that's hungry and I want to give them some food. You know, a lot of good people just feel out of their own moral compass, or they feel God calls them to help people out who are hungry. You know, Jesus fed people. Jesus protected the prostitute and said, "He who is without sin, cast the first stone." There's a lot of people, whether it's for religious reasons or even if they're not necessarily religious, just their general moral compass, do feel on a personal level that they want to help the downtrodden. That's always been a thing. But to have the government do it, that's reallocation of wealth. That's reallocation of wealth where I believe taxation's theft, where it used to be the old saying, steal from the rich and give to the poor. The whole Robin Hood thing, right? Well, that's actually socialist communist propaganda at the end of the day, really, if you think about it. Even if somebody wants to help somebody else out, you don't do that by having one entity, one powerful entity, steal from everybody and then just give it away to others without your consent. You keep doing more and more of that. At the very least, it's called socialism. You keep doing it to the nth degree, which they keep pushing it further and further. This is communism. This is Karl Marx. Marxism, the predecessor to communism, but this has never really actually gone into effect because it's not really possible. I think they say you can have a few dozen people that could live in a communist society. Once you get past just a few dozen people, it can never, ever work. You guys ever heard that? Like they say in theory, and I don't even know how well that works, but they say if you have, I don't know, like a small little commune and 40, 50 people, maybe something like that, goes and together pitches in on 100 acres of land and they have a self-sufficient little thing going. Sometimes this is borderline, whether it's a commune or a cult. And I may be repeating myself when I say those two things. But yeah, you might be able to sort it out on that small of a level. Everyone chips in the proper amount of work. Everyone just takes what they need. Have a nice day. But this has never, ever worked on a national level. But now it's to the point where it's not even a partisan issue anymore. Just steal from everyone and give to everybody. Now, I'll tell you what, it kind of does perturb me just a little bit, thinking that they're going to steal money from me and give it to anyone else's kid. Actually, I'm kind of bothered with that because it's the government taking it and they waste so much of the money. And these lunches are garbage and in most cases offer very little nutritional value at all. But then there's something even extra where it kind of almost ticks me off a little bit to think how hard I'm struggling financially right now. And so many people are in this state that a little bit of my tax dollar would actually have to go to pay for a multi-millionaire's lunch. Both of those are unsettling. It's just like, what? But that's their main priorities right now. And that's what they're doing. Yeah. How's it going, Denny's plant-based journey? I like to help people and I feed people often. It isn't the government's job to feed people. That's the job of people and churches. You know what I was talking about. Yeah. Saying hi to some channel members real quick here, and then we're going to get into this 2A stuff now that everybody's here. What's up, Vince? How you doing, man? Hey, Mike. Mike McClune. Eric Middleton, the extremism gets us nowhere. I agree, and the left has become very extreme. It actually retards progress. Well, that depends what you mean by progress. Progress is one of those words that is used to mean many things nowadays. I was with you on everything, boss. Oh, you were with me. Okay. Then you went all ... I hope Michigan can progress positively in its firearms policies. Well, I'm not really sure what that means. If you can put more of a somewhat coherent thought together, I might understand. I think you were giving me a compliment, but I'm not so sure, actually. So if the government shuts down, it was inevitable. It still may happen. They have not, no one's voted yet. They only have 3 days. The governor has to sign, right? couple things to think about that are directly to do with the Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So in Michigan, we had some new gun control laws that came into effect a couple years ago, went into effect last year. One of those is what we call this universal licensing registration scheme, because that's really what this is all about, is trying to register everything. And we'll cover it real quickly, although we've done an excellent job on this channel of covering this when it was happening, but there might be some new people here. And if you're new, welcome. So if you have a CPL, and I did a whole video just 2 weeks ago, so go back and watch that. You'll hear my thoughts in long form about my ideas on the fact that we should even need a CPL, and I reject the premise. And we've talked about this in depth. I'm not going to here, but I go back and forth on like, well, it is kind of my advantage to have one. Like, I want to keep myself out of jail. But then a part of me is like, oh, I'm ashamed that I have one, because shall not be infringed shouldn't require a permit. And chime in, guys, but we talked about this a lot 2 weeks ago. So CPL holders are generally exempt from this whole scheme. However, if you do not have a CPL and you want to do any private transfer, meaning face-to-face, not through a gun shop or a FFL, which is a federal firearms licensee, unless you have the CPL and you want to transfer a firearm face-to-face, this could be purchasing, this could be trading, this could be so far as loaning, even to go hunting with for a day. Now, if it's immediate family, there's some narrow exceptions with the loaning and transferring, but you guys can go look at all that. We've covered that before. Besides some narrow exceptions to like direct family member, but let's just say a guy you work with. Hey, man, can I borrow your 12 gauge to go hunt with? Sure, just bring it back tomorrow. No, not if you don't have CPLs. So any gun, if it's face-to-face, pistol, a long gun, it doesn't matter. You have to get what's called a license to purchase. Now, to get that, you have to go to your local police or sheriff, your CLEO, your chief law enforcement officer. If you live in the jurisdiction of a city limit proper, it's going to be your police station. If you live outside of the city, you're probably going to have a county sheriff. It might vary in some states, but that's how it works here. You're going to go there and you're going to have to get a permit to purchase. Purchase permit, it's called. But it could be a gift. It could be a loan. It could be a trade. It's really a transfer permit is what it is, but they call it purchase permit, whatever. You have to go there. You have to pay a small fee. You also have to get a background check. Now, this is a bit different check than the NICS check, which is the National Instant Check System. I'm going to explain the difference in 1 minute. But let's assume the state shuts down and you need to go get this license to purchase because you're doing a private transfer. Now, this is going to affect the non-CPL holders for some of the gun shop purchases too. There's a lot here. I'm trying to unpack it in order. If the government shuts down, they won't be able to fund everything. The governor will have to put out executive orders to fund what's considered the most crucial levels of things. So they'll make priorities in the state and have different tiers and say this is completely essential. It cannot shut down no matter what. And this is going to be across all these broad categories of things. And then there's other things that are going to get the axe while the government shut down. Shut down, if it happens, could happen for 3 hours, 3 days, and up to and including 3 months. They say they've made a tentative agreement. This is very recent breaking news, but it's not. There's no agreement until it actually passes the House and Senate and the governor signs it. She has 3 days to sign it. Just keep all this in mind as this is ongoing. This next is a bit speculative, but most likely the way it would work. And this isn't just my opinion. I've talked to some people on the inside. I've actually spent a ton of time on this. I just didn't know when to report on it because it's all been ongoing. Likely when it comes to the state police, they will still keep some, maybe not all, but they will still keep some patrolmen, patrolling officers that can respond to emergencies, 911 calls, things like that. If I were to opine, probably still have enough of them on the roads to radar people to give tickets because that seems like something they're always really, really highly prioritizing. But most likely when it comes to other things, like you think of the state police as just like a guy that's in a blue squad car with the red light on top, giving you a ticket, whatever. No, there's a huge division of the state police that does administration. And I believe when your local law enforcement calls in that local background check, this is the first step. In some cases, to buy from an FFL, it's the step you have to take if you're going through a private transfer without a CPL. I believe they're entering into the LEAN, the Law Enforcement Information Network. It's an acronym, right? And I believe that when they go to run that background check, it's getting resources from the Michigan State Police. If the state shuts down and there's nobody there to administer that on the other end, we could run into a scenario. This is very plausible if the state shuts down where those background checks may not be able to be done. Now, the background checks executed at the local sheriff's department or city police department. However, I assure you, they're not holding the whole database there at your local police department. Now, there's one thought where maybe it's all just automated and the servers could just keep running that have that info, but there's problems with that because, will the IT people that work for the state police to keep all this stuff going, will they be laid off? We're talking like state reps and senators. If the government shuts down, will not be getting paychecks anymore. Now, some departments will most likely have an option where people can kind of go in there and temporarily work for free under the understanding that when the government opens back up again, they get paid retro pay. That may be offered to certain departments, but it may not be offered to all departments. It all depends on how these executive orders would be put out from the governor, because if there's a government budget shutdown, we kind of go into this emergency mode where she has to go in and issue all these orders. We saw the chaos that ensued when she was issuing all these orders with the Kung flu. Literally losing in the Michigan Supreme Court on main issues. She was going so crazy with it, right? So I think it would be stand to reason that if the government shuts down, I'm not saying this will happen for sure, and I'm not saying it's going to shut down for sure, but if it does shut down, I think there's a decent chance something could start happening with these background checks that are done by the local police department for these purchase permits. And if this is a private transfer and you're not a CPL holders, then these are long guns and handguns. These are all firearms, keep in mind. Just due to the fact that you may need state police that are in these offices that could very well be laid off. Some may come in and work for free with reimbursement later. Some may not. They may or may not have that option, but this is all on the table and all possible. Will the IT staff be there? I mean, sometimes you have to do updates on the servers. You can't just leave a database. Some of you guys have some IT experience. You can't just, like, for long periods of time, just leave a huge database just sit there like unattended. Somebody has to do something to check on backups and to maybe compress it, to maybe run like a cleanup utility. There's a lot to this when it's on a high level, keeping databases of millions and millions and millions of records. Like constantly, every day. How much do they outsource of this? How much don't they outsource? Will they be able to pay their bills? I mean, there's just certain things like this that literally, and I've been told it's on a very good accord internally that, yeah, there'd be a very good chance if the state shuts down, they will shut down the administrative offices and portions of the state police. Well, you may run into a rough time with that. Because when they go to call them these background checks, even if they're doing them on the computer, some still call in and do it by phone from what I understand. Hey, if there's no one there to pick up the phone from the state police right then and there, then yeah. You know what I mean? Then that could shut down stuff real quick. But even if it's all via a computer, this stuff's only automated insofar as there's still physical people there as of now. And they may even work from home. I get all that. Some may even be outsourced to third-party companies, but then they'd have to pay the bill. If there's no budget and you can't pay for your, let me make this up, Google Cloud storage, I don't know if that's what the state police use or not, but you know what I'm getting at, and you can't pay the bill, sometimes they shut it off. All these things could happen, and you do need to be aware if it shuts down, you may have a hard time doing private transfers if you choose to follow the law. I know there's people typing right now being like, yeah, right, I ain't going to get no license to purchase, from a private transfer. Look, man, I don't know what you guys do. I'm not going to encourage anyone to break the laws here on this channel. I'm also not a cop. I don't know what you guys do, but anyone who wants to follow the law may run into a hard time with those transfers. FFL purchases for non-CPL holders. When it comes to a handgun, you still have to go get a license to purchase from your locality. Like I just talked about earlier, everything's the same. To buy a handgun from an FFL dealer, but not a long gun. But here's the thing, there's different shops. And again, there's no legal advice. I'm just telling you guys the way I understand things. This is all my opinion officially. If you need legal advice, call a lawyer. But for a handgun, if you don't have a CPL, you have to get this purchase permit from your locality first and then bring it into the FFL. But for a long gun, you don't have to. But there's some shops that require it for a long gun or a handgun for a non-CPL holder. Because some gun shop owners are kind of taking the route of, well, we know there's a bunch more new restrictions on us. We'll just double the restrictions that are on ourselves more than what there really are, just to play it safe, to play it extra super duper duper safe. And you know what? I respect property rights. I do. But I don't like hearing that at all. It kind of ticks me off. When we have all this draconian gun control as it is, and a local FFL thinks they're going to like self-impose more gun control on people than what there actually is, I don't like it. And I would not shop at a place like that. And if somebody was asking for my personal opinion, I would not encourage a friend or anyone who's asking my opinion to patronize any gun shop that is putting additional restrictions above and beyond the already draconian restrictions we have. But I'm just telling you, I've been hearing a lot of stuff. I have a lot of friends that live in this state. A lot of you guys who live in this state tell me all kinds of stories. Some of them are making you get a license to purchase for a handgun or a long gun before you can buy it from a gun shop. And yes, you are getting a second background check via NICS. NICS is done on the federal level. So if you're getting a NICS check in Michigan, unless there's something I can't think of right now, and when I say I can't think of, I've spent a lot of time in the last week talking to people behind the scenes. I've talked to a local gun shop owner. I've talked to legislators. I've had my questions asked and answered from the various legal counsels, both internally within Lansing, external private lawyers. Now, I didn't hire them in a client attorney type of way, but I've talked to lawyers that literally both work for the government and don't work for the government about this. To be more specific, I've had people on the inside ask some attorneys in the government about this, and these are things that are getting brought up. So you could run into some trouble there. With a regular NICS check, probably not. So if you have a CPL, you shouldn't even need a NICS check at a gun shop because Michigan is now a NICS bypass state. Check out my channel. That just happened this May. I was happy to report on that. I'm learning that 3/4 to 90% of the gun shops in Michigan just aren't following that. Now, the way the ATF directive reads is yeah, you can use a CPL in lieu of a NICS check for CPL holders in Michigan now. Great. That's how it used to be. It's back to the status quo. We shouldn't need CPLs. Okay. Trust me. The 4473 and the NICS check are also unconstitutional. I don't agree with any of that. What I'm saying is it takes it back to how it was a few years ago, which is less worse than what it was up till recently, right? But now I'm getting reports from viewers, and it seems like about 75 to 90% of gun shops out there aren't even accepting a CPL in lieu of a NICS check. So your results may vary there. And this is just yet again where, in abundance of caution, a lot of FFLs are putting more gun control upon their customers than, believe it or not, what Governor Gretchen Whitmer has signed. I mean, it is what it is. There's excellent gun shops out there that would never do that and are not doing that. I'm going to make myself clear. But unless all my viewers that are telling me this are lying to me, I'm getting reports, gotten tons of reports of My gun shop's not acknowledging that new ATF announcement and letter that they sent out to all FFLs. Well, my gun shop still makes me get a purchase permit from the local sheriff, even though I do have a CPL. I'm hearing all this stuff, you know? And maybe some of you guys have these stories. So that's the deal where if the government shuts down, you could run into trouble being able to lawfully transfer firearms face-to-face, buying handguns from a gun shop without a CPL, and maybe more than that. Again, depending on what extracurricular restrictions that the gun shop owner may be choosing to self-impose upon you. All right. Now, there's the RI-60, the pistol sales record. That's the registry. There is a pistol registry in Michigan. Now it's the seller or the person it's being transferred from, which is a huge problem, that has to submit. Look, all of it's a problem. The whole registry is a problem. But now it's even worse than it was before, right? Now, the seller, we'll just call it. Because they always use buyer and seller, but it's not always a sale. Sometimes there's just a transfer, meaning you're trading, you're giving, you're gifting, possibly even loaning. But for purposes of this, they always call it buyer and seller. So now the seller has to turn in the copies of the RI-60. It used to be that the purchaser had to submit the copy to be registered, retain their own for 30 days. Well, the law says you have to retain it for 30 days because by then it will have been put into the database. The LEAN, Law Enforcement Information Network, all of this. If a cop pulls you over on the side of the road, you have to disclose in Michigan immediately. Okay? When you have an official encounter with the police, the first things you have to say essentially is, and here's the way I would say it, just my opinion, officer, deputy, however you address them. I'm a CPL holder and I'm currently concealed carrying with their hands right up on the wheel. Maybe even flat on the wheel. Whatever. Just don't say, I've got a gun, because that's a code word for them. In the heat of the moment at traffic stop, they use that word. Gun, gun, gun. Pow, 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 pow. And that's usually when you hear them unload as fast as they can. I would caution you, if you want my personal experience, if you ever get pulled over or just stopped by a police officer, I would not say, I have a gun. That may legally, yes, that legally probably does comply with the law because you have to notify. I would try to, if you could. Now, this is not because you're bending your knee to the government. This is not because you should have to. I reject the premise. Just if you want to make sure you can leave alive is what I'm literally getting at that day. And let's say you feel like being respectful to the police officer and you don't want them to have a coronary either. This could be for yourself. It could be goodwill towards the cops. It could be a combination of both. I don't care. Some of my viewers hate the cops. And even if you hate the cops, assuming you don't hate yourself, I'm a CPL holder and I'm currently carrying. When they hear CPL holder, it puts them a lot more at ease than if you just say, I have a gun. Okay. So you have to notify them right away. Slight digression there. That's how I do it. So now that they know, they do have the option to say, well, I'd like to inspect the firearm, look at the firearm, take temporary custody of the firearm during the traffic stop. Well, that's part of the laws of Michigan. Sometimes the police officer or deputy will go so far as, and I'm not saying they always do this, from my experience talking to people, and the couple times I've been pulled over with a CPL, they haven't chosen to do this, but they can go ahead and look it up. They can run the numbers of your gun. You can run into a big problem on the side of the road if they say this isn't registered in your name, because there is a pistol registration. Now, if you're a CPL holder, you're supposed to be able to still carry borrowing anybody's gun, right? If you're a CPL holder. But it could still run into problems if, and this is the hypothetical, it shuts down and there's nobody there to be entering these into the database. Say the shutdown were to last for 10 days, 30 days, 60 days. The gun might still be showing up in somebody else's name. You shouldn't be criminally liable, although I'm not a lawyer, no legal advice here, but it still could create that weird thing with the officer on the side of the road. A lot of times, this is just the way it works, unfortunately. When in doubt, they just arrest you, and or take the gun, and it'll just all get sorted out later. Sometimes you win in the end. Sometimes even if you win, you lose, because a lot of times the punishment's the process. So I fear if it shuts down, we could run into a scenario, if it stays shut down long enough, where although these pistol registrations may be getting submitted to the police for registration purposes, there might not be anybody there to enter them in because they're on a regular old piece of paper and someone's typing it into something. Now, I think maybe the local jurisdictions might type it in and upload it to the state police. But again, if the office ain't staffed, will it truly take or not? I don't know. So that's something else to think about. CPLs. We used to have county gun boards or county CPL boards, where if you got denied or whatever, you go in front of a review board in your county and they would hold a vote on it. It used to be handled, the issuance, on the local level. Now, although you do your CPL process to your local county clerk generally, and the first time you do have to go there face to face, and you have to get your fingerprints, pay your fee. I don't think you have to take pictures at all anymore in Michigan, because they just take the one that's stored for your driver's license or your state ID. And they just kind of move that into there digitally, issue you the card. But you still have to go there face to face. But the state police are still a key element to this. They do the background check, and the state police are actually the ones who issue. Now, when I had the question asked of, we'll just say insider legal counsel, that again, this is all speculation because this hasn't happened. They say they're going to avert the shutdown. We don't know. As of right now, there's 3 days to get this together. So I just want, if anyone's just joining, the way it was worded to me is, ooh, good point. Nobody's asked that, first of all. And as I continue to gather info, it's like, yeah, if someone has passed their class that's required to get a CPL, they might want to hurry up and get that like ASAP and not wait until the first of the month. After further conversations, there is definitely a sincere worry that there's a high probability if it remains shut down, no new CPLs they may not be issued during this shutdown. Now, none of this is 100% sure because, again, the governor gets to put forth an executive order kind of allocating which staff. But trust me, almost all of the staff in Michigan has to be shut down. She's not allowed to just say, I hereby declare that everyone gets to keep working and nothing changes. No. There's only a very narrow amount of state employees that will be allowed to still be getting paid. So we have the issue, to summarize, with private transfers potentially. If this shuts down and stays shut down, people without CPLs trying to purchase handguns from FFLs, possibly long guns, again, depending on the FFL. Getting a CPL, yeah, the state police is in charge of CPLs. And there's one more big thing that's also definitely has to do with the Second Amendment. Maybe not prima facie, but we kind of lump in a lot of times hunting. Now, look, the Second Amendment's not about hunting. Let me make it crystal clear. However, there's a lot of gun owners out there that do use their guns for hunting. Unfortunately, many hunters are not pro-Second Amendment, or we wouldn't find ourselves in the shape we're in. But there are plenty of pro-Second Amendment hunters too. And I have a feeling a lot of you guys are hunters. So although I don't consider hunting actually a Second Amendment issue, really, it is in a way. Like, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And of course, that affords you the liberty, or prevents the government from infringing on your natural liberty, is the way I'd rather word that. You know, that yeah, of course you can collect, you can hunt, you can hang out, you can target shoot, you can compete. But really, being necessary to the security of a free state, the Second Amendment literally tells you why. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So yeah, hunting gets tied in with that. And a lot of you guys are hunters. Doesn't all that go through the DNR to get hunting licenses? Now, they still may have some select DNR agents out there to bust you for poaching, or maybe to, respond to emergencies that could happen and whatnot. But it would be highly likely, if the state shuts down, that the administrative sides of those things, those people be laid off. Now, I know you can go get your hunting license from Walmart and whatnot. And yet again, it's automated now through the computer. But like I said earlier, with a lot of these things, That's still all going through the state of Michigan. These are state employees that work for the DNR, Department of Natural Resources. If they furloughed or laid off a whole big, huge skyrise building full of government employees, can something literally be completely and utterly self-contained to the point where, I mean, I don't know. I've kind of asked the question a couple times, and there are more of you than me, and it's hard for me to keep track of all of the comments. Maybe some of you have actually answered me. I just don't know. But some of you have like even a little bit of IT experience, and I actually do have some. That's a weird thing, right? Like in theory, like the server could just keep on being there, but if it's shut down for a period of time and there's nobody there updating it, keying information into it, there's nobody there maintaining these databases and stuff, I don't know. I don't think it's possible that this stuff just keeps working on its own if there ain't nobody there, right? So also, if the state of Michigan shuts down, meaning they can't pass this budget, I think it's highly probable you could run into situations with your hunting license. Now, fishing's not really gun related, and I know there's hunting that's bows and all that, but you could, obviously, a lot of you are fishermen too. Let's start thinking about the fishing, you know? I mean, so those are concerns that I have. And I wanted to put out the video earlier, but I kept on hearing little things like, it's going to shut down no matter what. It's going to shut down no matter what. That's what all the insiders were saying in Lansing. Till the last minute, it's like, hold on, though. Wait a minute. They might not shut down. So tell me where you guys are at. Let me know if you have any questions. And then, did I make the right choice? Because I started off the stream telling you, look, I could have reported on this a week and a half ago. So that's when I started thinking about it. It's such a fine line, man. Like, guys, the government's going to shut down no matter what, because that's what they were all saying at the time. You might not be able to buy a gun or transfer a gun or get a CPL or get a hunting license. The end is nigh. And get ready, boys. Time to saddle up. It's the end of the world as we know it. You know, if I would have put the right title, that would have got tons of views. But here's the thing. I didn't want that. But I did want to let all my friends know. And I know I've been a source of a lot of information when it comes to stuff on the Second Amendment, otherwise known as our gun rights in Michigan. I needed to report on this. And everybody I talked to, this is the crazy part, like, and I say insiders, not like, oh, I'm sort of part of some cool kids club. No, this is where you need insiders. Like, I'm talking to legislators. I'm talking to central staff, people in Lansing. These are the ones in all these meetings and even closed door meetings. If you want to know what's going on with a potential shutdown, you have to talk to insiders. So I was. And literally all the way up to last night, they're telling me it's going to shut down no matter what. And I'm like, man, but I don't want to tell people this unless it's imminent. I'm like, all right, I just got to talk about it Friday regardless. Last night, they say they've reached an agreement. We're not going to shut down. So I don't know. Should have I reported on this a week and a half ago to give you guys a heads up? Or would have that just got people unduly nervous and freaking out? It's a fine line. Because at that time, like, just the honest information I would have given you is this shutdown is going to happen. There's no way to avert it. Because that's what literally everybody who knew anything was saying. Except for I was hearing a couple little chirps. And I'm like, no, I think the Republicans will probably cave enough to make this happen in the end. So hopefully I've given you enough notice. But I didn't want to come off half-cocked and just throw stuff out too early. Does that make sense? So although it's way less likely, just to summarize, than it was just even 24 hours ago, under no uncertain terms, and I'm going to read this right from Bridge, Michigan, because they tell you right on their website, this is Bridge MI is the name of the site. It's called Bridge, Michigan. And they say right up top, Michigan's nonpartisan nonprofit. The way I read their stuff, I think they're on the liberal side. That's my opinion. Governor Whitmer, legislative leaders announced they've reached a tentative agreement on a state budget. Point number 2, full details are not yet known. I mean, come on. Why would we, the people, know? You know what I'm saying? They're not yet known. Of course they're not known. I guess, remember Pelosi said that about Obamacare? What's in the bill, everybody said? Well, you have to pass the bill to be able to read the bill. Excuse me? Dude, that precedent's been set a long time ago. So yet again, Full details are not yet known, but the plan will include new funding for Michigan roads. I sure hope the Republicans are going to stand strong, because right now the version they've passed, although they're going to have to go back and renegotiate, both chambers have to vote again. Don't forget this. Right now they've defunded that tip hotline of kids ratting out their parents. It's very scary. Now look, if you have parents that are just terrible, rotten parents, and you kind of know it when you see it, and they're harming children within the home and all this, yeah, we've had plenty of methods in my lifetime, and probably for 100 years, there's already ways that the state can get involved if there's something truly crazy going on. However, there's also tons of misuse of state power, and there's parents actually that are great parents, but they've just ticked off the state. And look, this can go on both sides of the political aisle, what I'm talking about right now. Look, Democrats say, look, we're living under Trump. We have to fear for how we raise our families. Conservatives say we're living under Biden. We have to fear for. So this is one that's universal, I think, to be fair. And look, I'm not into compromising with the other side in anything. But when it comes to this, whoever's in power, the other side's afraid the government's going to come into their home and mess with them. And it's abused all the time. I get all of that. Okay? But with that said, they still have to pass the bill before we know what's in the bill, and we're not going to know, and we're this and we're that. I don't know. But the plan will include new funding for Michigan roads, and it better not include that $1 million again. Republicans need to stand strong, because I do not want my taxpayer dollars spending $1 million for the government curriculum set up by any administration. But I'm going to be biased, because that is my bias, and sometimes you guys want my opinion, let alone this current administration that's in Lansing right now, how they're going to brainwash, teach, whatever words you want to use it, children, on how their parents are going to have firearms within the home. They bet right now it's defunded. I hope that's not nothing they're going to compromise on. But the plan will include new funding for roads. Third bullet point, state lawmakers still need to pass. Don't forget, that's both chambers of the legislature. The lower chamber, the House. The upper chamber, the Senate. They're going to have to pass their own versions. They're going to have to agree on this. And the governor must sign. And now we're down to 3 days and 54 minutes. This has to happen. Now, to me, it would still be a right delayed is a right denied. What do you all think about this? Even if the government shut down for 3 hours and somebody tried to do a private transfer and they couldn't do it because let's just say the database was down hypothetically, and they had to come back 3 hours later, or they had to come back the next day. To me, that would still be unacceptable. Because first of all, I don't accept the premise of these permits anyways. All of it's unacceptable, but we find ourselves in the place we're in. So within the constraints that the law-abiding live under, because just remember, all of these laws only affect the law-abiding. Within the constraints of the law-abiding, yeah, any infringement is completely unconstitutional, and even having to wait 3 minutes, 3 hours extra, 3 days extra just makes it that much worse than it already is. That's my opinion. I don't know what you think. But if it starts getting into 3 hours, is 3 days, is a week, is 3 weeks, look, I was talking to some people literally that work in Lansing for a living saying, I think we're going to shut down no matter what. Look, they were literally having meetings one more time. Because I'm not trying to repeat myself for all of you. I know that you guys have been here the whole time, are smart enough to hear it the first time, but it's a live stream, okay? And definitely shout out to the replay crew. Some of you watch this as a podcast and chime in the comments. But whoever just joined here, insiders in Lansing that literally get their paycheck from there have said that they were going around telling them, save your money, make sure your finances are in good order, be prepared to not have a paycheck for days, weeks, or up to 3 months. I was like, 3 months? And the person I was talking on the phone said, they warned us we might not have a paycheck. This could go on for 3 months. Now, I would say for certain, if the government was shut down for 3 hours, we might not notice anything at all. Maybe. There might just be a little blip for a few people here and there. That's not acceptable. None of this is. But if it started to turn into 3 days, I think people start to actually notice. A week, probably. If it got to weeks and months, I think we could find ourselves in that situation. Like I said earlier, CPLs, transfers, both privately and at gun shops in certain instances for non-licensees, hunting licenses, maybe that weird situation on the side of the road where the cop's like, but the gun's not in your name. I don't know. I can't just let you go. So we're going to have to err on the side of officer safety and just take the gun and take you in. And a lot of stuff can happen, man. So you've all been warned if this happens. I would have felt terrible, right? Just to conclude what I was saying earlier. I would have felt terrible if I thought of all this, and maybe some of you had thought of all this, but maybe some of you hadn't. And that would have been terrible if we shut down, and we still might shut down again. We're not out of the woods yet. They're just saying they've reached an agreement. Whatever. Probably not going to be in a good agreement for us. This Democrats' budget is extremely radical. I do not just trust the Republican budget. You guys should know me well enough by now. But the Republicans in this case, because we can't just be black-pilled about everything. The Republicans did do a couple things in this new budget they had promised they'd do, with repealing that tip hotline was something that was promised no matter what that they would do. So far, they've done that. They better not change their mind at the last minute. They did cut $5 billion where the Dems want to raise it $8 billion. So I might only give it a C-. Trust me, I don't. But the Democrats, their budget's like an F. And maybe the Republicans' budget's like a C- or D+ or something, which is still a lot better than a F. You know, I'm trying to call a spade, but I would have felt terrible if you guys are like, dude, I can't even get my CPO because we're in week 3 of the shutdown. I'm like, oh, I knew, and I should have told you ahead of time so you could hurry up and get in there if you needed to get it. So here's the deal: if you're like thinking, man, in the next week or two, I'm going to transfer a gun with my neighbor, and I want to follow all the laws, and I need to get a license to purchase. And if it's just kind of like ho-he, ho-hum, whatever, maybe just get in there in the next couple days and just get it taken care of. You won't have anything to worry about. If you've already passed your class and you're like, yeah, I was thinking about going in to get my CPL. Yeah, I might go Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday. Maybe go Tuesday. You know, if you're going to get a hunting license no matter what anyways, maybe just get it in the next couple days. I'm not saying to run out and get a hunting license when you have no plans to hunt. If you already have enough guns or too many guns or whatever, if that's such a thing, I'm not saying go out and buy 10 guns. Just think about it. It's not a done deal. The government still could shut down. And if it does, these things could happen. So we will see what happens here. Mateo would come in with a super chat right off the bat, and channel member and moderator, and I thank you. He says, kicking off the super chats. Well, thanks, Mateo. I appreciate it, man. Joe Little, channel member and a super chat. What's happening, man? Joe Little says, why are Michigan roads so poopy? I kind of talked about it at the beginning of the stream. One of the viewers said maybe they could take all the free lunches and use those as road materials. I thought that was kind of cute, you know. Maybe actually, like, you could take like some of this stuff on school lunches is kind of on the sketchy side. Like, it might be more durable than what's in the roads. I don't know, man. They pave the road perfectly, then they cut all these swaths in it, and then like refill them right back in, and it's never even, and that's the first place it chips. They literally like start like destroying them, and I don't just mean from traffic, but like cutting into them with saws. I'll reread the chat replay later. I know some of you guys probably chimed in, but you just have to see it to believe it. They just cut those swaths out of the freeway, like when it's still new, and then just refill them right back in. It's like, excuse me? And that's always where the bumps are. Now, it looks like you drive 18 wheels by your Avatar, all right? I don't drive quite that many. 10 wheels, right? So my dually stake truck with my 16-foot trailer. Got a little bit of weight back there when I'm driving down certain lanes of 96. Okay. I'm literally sitting there like I'm in a boat in the water going, bloop, 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 bloop. It's like you're sitting there weaving like this in the truck, and then the trailer behind me is going, brrr. Because like every 50 feet, which is like every second when you're going 60, 65 miles an hour, because they cut these swaths out of the brand new road that was just put in, like, it could be weeks earlier, whatever. Like when it's essentially still brand new, they cut these swaths out and they they repave it and it's never the same level. And it's like, and then the potholes start forming from there. And then they run around with this hot patch and there's the crews working. Shout out to the crews that are working. You know, they're just doing what they do. And they sit there and they just chuck a lump of hot asphalt into the hole. And then the traffic drives over it and it's never smooth. And it's just, it is what it is, what it is. And I would just say government mismanagement forever. We do have a couple things going against us too, just to be fair. Look, the South does have something major over on Michigan. You go down south, the roads are like perfect in so many places. Not everywhere, guys. I've been down some back roads in the South, but way better than Michigan. Well, yeah, keep in mind, like, what's the frost cycle? What's the frost line in Alabama and Georgia, for example? You know, Florida. Is there one? Is there frost laws? Is there certain times a year where you have to lighten your loads if you're in a big truck? I don't know. There may or may not even be frost laws in South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi, Texas. You know, I'm just throwing out a few here right now. I don't know. So you don't have that cold weather and that constant, that freezing and thaw cycles. There's certain times a year where they put the frost laws on, where the ground's like really punky underneath, where the frost is starting to come out and it's real just wet and soupy and mucky. You guys probably know the time of year I'm talking about. And the government make an official determination. There's all that. Building materials, from what I understand, they've gone woke with a lot of it and they're not allowing them to use some of the good stuff, air quotes, the good stuff in the concrete mix, trying to reduce things like maybe they're using extra fly ash and less whatever. Chime in, concrete guys. I'm not a concrete guy, but I know people who are. And if my friend Frank was watching, he'd chime in and tell you, because he's told me plenty of times. I've just slept since then and I forgot, but we used to use more of a certain ingredient in the concrete, and now they're not allowing it anymore or not allowing as much. So there's a myriad of factors. Government mismanagement. We do get the 4 seasons here. We do use salt on our roads, which is highly corrosive. And you're not allowed to put again, for all the listeners, the air quote, the good stuff. You can't put that in there like you used to be able to. That's what I'm told by concrete experts. Or we'll just blame it all on the truckers, right? Because that's what a lot of people do too. I ain't going to do that because a semi-truck is a very effective way to move freight. We need to have freight moved around. Just everything we buy is coming or going on a truck. Trains are great too. Trains are great. A train can move immense amounts of stuff. Well, to and from like train stations and train yards. But like literally just to get the stuff to your local mom and pop shop, to your local super Walmart, to your whatever. You know, I mean, I'd say semis are pretty important. Now, hold on. I'm going to say one last thing and then I'm going to move on. I like most semi-truck drivers if they speak English. The problem we have now is a lot of these, no English. It's like, excuse me? So you can't read that sign that says, warning, slow down ahead. You can't read the amber alerts that come up on there. Now, there's amber alerts for like abducted child, but there's the other ones that are just in the color amber. So maybe they're not officially called an amber alert, but they pop up on these big, and they might not have these all over the state, but certain parts of the state, there's these big like billboards, and in the amber like LEDs, they'll say icy conditions ahead or slow down, you know, accident up ahead. No English, no English. It's like, excuse me? Look, shout out to all the truckers, okay? Only if you speak English. If you can't speak English, let me just say this real quick, all right? Now, you know that old saying, Mateo? When you throw a rock into a pack of dogs, the one that barks, the ones you hit. That's the one you hit. Somebody invariably usually gets butthurt when I say something like this. But to try to avert it, because I'm in a good mood, and I want everyone to be nice. Very nice, okay? If you immigrated to this country the right way and you're an excellent, productive citizen, that's great. I don't give a crap if whatever was your first language. That's fine. You came here the right way properly. Now you're a productive member of society. Good to have you here. I'm not talking to you, Joe. I'm just saying, like, to whoever. Because there's always someone out there that wants to get a little bit, their panties up in a ruffle. 2A you're racist. So what? Deal with it. But that's besides the point. Now, look, I don't care if Spanish is your first, second, third language. Sprechen Sie Deutsch. I don't speak German either, though. Au revoir. Parlez-vous français? Whatever. Uno, dos, tres. Cuatro, cinco, cinco, seis. Burrito, taco. Wonton soup. Me love you long time. There you go. That's my diversity of all my languages. I'm very diverse, but I'm not politically correct. I don't give a crap. If you're here the right way, properly, you still need to learn English to be in America. That's in my opinion. Speak English or get the F out. You know, that old biker helmet. Speak English or get the, being very politely, F out. But now there's the truck drivers. They're driving around with 50,000 pounds, 100,000 pounds. Michigan has the Michigan Special Truck. It's so heavy it essentially can't leave the state because the other adjacent roads in the other states can't even accept it. It weighs so much. We're talking axles with wheels almost touching each other down the whole trailer. This thing loses control. This thing doesn't. Whoever's driving it can't turn. They can't whatever. Many people can die. So shout out to all the truckers, but only the ones that speak English. Because if you can't read our road signs and then you show up to where your freight's getting delivered and you literally can't speak, learn to speak. Because here's the problem. If I wanted to work in another country and I refused to speak, probably wouldn't go too well, would it? So there you go. Fun to learn. Channel member and a super chat. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. He says timelines don't seem to matter to this administration. No, I mean, the Republicans do. They passed the budget. And I'm not, again, you guys know I'm not a Republican or a Democrat, by the way. I'm not even a libertarian. But the Republicans in this specific house, they cut the budget more than I can remember seeing, to be fair. And one really big issue that I know a lot of you, I'm not going to say I'm going to say we worked hard on. I hope I'm not the only one that was calling. When they passed that tip hotline, I'm like, they can defund that instantly in the next budget. Well, if the House can just come in there and if they can just switch it over to Republican, it might be less worse. We'll see. So far, they're not living up to my expectations on the Second Amendment at all, except for one thing. The House budget that was passed, it seems like we did bring it to their attention enough. And they've agreed and said we will defund the tip hotline. But now this is ongoing, and I hope that doesn't get compromised away. I really don't. So as it sits right now, this could change if the Republicans renegotiate. And I don't think they're gonna. I hope that I'm trying to be positive. I shouldn't say I don't think. I don't know. I hope they're not going to sell us up the river. But as of right now, they are standing strong to defund that tip hotline. So I'm going to blame this whole budget crisis on the Democrats more right now. And I could talk an hour like just on how I come up with all that. But that's the big thing when it comes to the two-way. There's other things. I've been studying this a lot behind the scenes. And yeah, there's there's lots of stuff like this. Look, I showed you guys how diverse I am tonight, didn't I? Fun to learn. LOL. We love you long time. I don't know. I mean, you know what I'm saying, though, right? I probably wouldn't get along too well if I moved to an Oriental country and I wanted to drive an 18-wheeler on their roads, and they're like, sir, you must pass English tests. But they probably say it in their own language is more like it. You show up, konnichiwa. Okay. And look, these are good people that live there. Excellent people. They stay over there. I'll stay over here. We'll get along great. But look, these are good people and all. But if I show up and they're like, all right, now you must pass Chinese proficiency test or Japanese or whatever it is. And I'm like, wonton, egg roll, General Tso. I mean, can you imagine how that would go? Just think about this for a minute. 2A EDU, me. I go to apply to get my version of a CDL in the People's Republic of China. I'm like, hey guys, how's it going? That sounds just as weird to them as when we hear them go, I mean, just whatever, right? I get it, the video game culture. Great. Now, they come over and I'm like, yeah. Me want to drive 18 wheel. And they're like, all right, must pass Chinese test. And I say, wonton, egg drop, General Tso, almond chicken. They're going to look at me and be like, ooh, you Uyghur Muslim? Then they'll just put me in a concentration camp and make me build iPhones. But I'm not even Muslim. I don't like Uyghurs or the other close pronunciation or any of it. I don't like anything that's even pronounced. I don't know any of this. Doesn't matter. You work, camp, make iPhone long time. It's like somebody 2A EDU. Oh my gosh. This is the most bigoted thing I've ever heard of. What? That you need to speak English to drive 18 wheels down the road? Give me a break. Shows you how soft we've gotten. But you need to compromise. No. Who in their right mind? So we'll see what happens with this budget, and I hope everything works good. Pennsylvania. I was saddened to hear that you're kind of going down the path of Michigan 2 years ago. But right now, where Michigan was a couple years ago. From what I understand, they're in a committee hearing. You've had some of the same exact bills, like they're all written by the same people. Red flag. The same license to purchase, universal background check, registration, licensing. Registration has always led to confiscation scheme. I feel for you. Trust me, I know how this works because we just went through it here in Michigan. It ain't over yet. I hope you guys have a way. I know you have one Democrat, from what I've heard, that's maybe not willing to pass everything, but they're still willing to vote on quite a bit. I think it's fair to say, right, Mike McClune? You're hanging out here from Pennsylvania. If there's anyone else from Pennsylvania, let me know. I'm just kind of throwing the alert out there, guys. If you live in Pennsylvania, you need to get a hold of your legislators if it can make a difference. I hope it can. I really, really hope you guys can stop this, but it's just looking like a carbon footprint right now of what we see in Michigan, just kind of like bam, 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 like they're risiographing it. By the way, did I just date myself? Does anyone remember the risiograph machine? Huh? Come on, somebody else does. Someone that's watching this that's 21, they're like, did he just say risiograph? Okay, boomer. No, I'm actually Generation X, but whatever. No, it's like they've risiographed all the... Mateo, I know you know what a risiograph is. But they risiographed Michigan laws. And they're going through Pennsylvania. That's not how I know how ugly these laws are. That's how I know how ugly they are. And I wish you the best. One more thing. Let's end the stream on a fun note tonight. Glock. Covered it on this stream a month ago. Not going to get into all of it again. Glock's calling for gun control on the state level. They wrote a letter to legislators in Oklahoma. This seems to be the thing throughout the country now, that everyone wants to ban these so-called Glock switches. And I'm going to yet again double down and say this is not a good idea at all. This is not okay. And furthermore, this is not a waste of time. This is not a moot point. This is not redundant. In fact, I have no ill will towards anybody out there right now, so I'm not going to say their name. But I heard a very, very popular Second Amendment YouTuber just the other day put out a video and said, now this is just pointless, but Pennsylvania is trying to pass a so-called Glock switch ban. And then he went on to say this would ban them 3 times. They're already banned 2 different ways on the federal level, and then they'd now be banned a 3rd time, which doesn't really do anything different. It makes it a moot point. Why waste our time? All right. And I like this person. I'm not going to say their name. I can't even remember who said it right now as I sit here. I have a lot of stuff going on right now. But they said it really doesn't do anything, but, and then I think they said they were still kind of against it anyways. No, this does do something. Because here's the difference. Yes. In May of 1986, the Hughes Amendment was part of the Firearms Owners Protection Act, and it passed. And it said no new machine guns could be added to the registry. If it was added before May of 86, it's called a transferable. If you transfer pursuant to the NFA, all of the infringing things that go with it, machine guns are still legal, but nothing else can be added to the registry after May of 86. So far as I know, Glock switches didn't exist then. So there you go. There's probably not any available that are transferable. So there's actually really only one federal law out there that makes Glock switches basically illegal. And that's because none of them will be able to be registered. They're not grandfathered in. There really isn't a second law out there. And this is not nothing. Because let's move it over to something that's a lot more germane. First of all, a lot of these Glock switch bans include other items, and in some cases, several items, in some cases, many other items that are not Glock switches, that are other things that a lot of you own or would like to own too. Very slippery slope. So that's why this isn't just a moot point and, oh, they're just banning the same thing 2 times, 3 times. If I had a penny for everybody that says that, I could actually make a living doing this. But it's just wrong. It's not just, oh, they're just repeating it. Let me prove to you why. Not only do many of these ban extra things besides just the switch, but look at the bump stock ban. The ATF banned it 5 years ago, whenever. Supreme Court came through and overrode that federal ban. It wasn't a law, but it was a de facto ban by the ATF. Now, for many of the states, people can own bump stocks again, except for the states that have banned bump stocks. They still can't. So that literally proves that this is not a nothing burger. This is not redundant. This is extra gun control, which Glock's calling for and supporting, and it sucks. And I know they're your favorite brand in many cases. Whatever. You'll have to figure that out on your own. Okay? I'm not telling you whether you should hate Glock, whether you should still love Glock, but you're going to have to figure that out on your own. But I'm not going to keep letting it slide that this is the same exact thing. And they're already banned, so if they get banned on the state level, it means nothing, because it does. And I just literally told everybody why. There you go. There could be a Supreme Court case. There actually could be. That could overrule portions of the NFA. The bump stocks literally got overturned on the federal level, but they're still banned in the states that pass their own. So I don't know how anybody could literally keep arguing and saying, who cares if they pass a Glock switch ban in all these states? It doesn't mean anything because they're already banned unless or until it does. And right now it is still an unless or until. But there is a difference. And if there's more gun control passed at any level, it's never just same thing. It's always more gun control being passed. And I get it. And different people's opinions, some are more worse than others. More worse or I got to kind of dumb myself down to talk to some of the people out there sometimes. But most of you guys are actually smarter than I am. But look, more gun control, still more gun control. And no, if they pass the Glock switch ban, so-called, in Pennsylvania, this is more gun control, and it's not banning the same thing 3 times. I don't care who says it. It's not. So there you go. Deborah says, my husband and I got a concrete driveway 2 years ago. Good thing we don't drive a semi. And it's always a good idea, too, to put sealer every year or 2 on your driveway to help keep the top surface nice, too. All right. Well, the whole Glock thing's a sore subject, which I knew it would be. And we did discuss this in a whole nother stream, so that's probably why there's probably not a lot to be said about that. But that's okay, because I am going to jump off. I still have a lot of work to do this weekend. And good luck, Pennsylvania. Hopefully, I don't know, part of me wants the state of Michigan to shut down, actually, because every day we have where there's less government, to me is actually a good day. But I just don't want you guys to get caught with your pants down. They say they've averted the shutdown. Tentatively, we'll see. If it does shut down and some of this stuff gets affected, I'll be right on here to let you know exactly what's going on. In the meantime, though, yeah, we'll see. And if it gets to where it's like, when this weekend's over, you've only got like another day or so, and you think you need to get that CPL or that hunting license or do that transfer and get that license to purchase, whatever you think you need to do. Because one more time, this stuff only affects the law-abiding as always. I just wanted you to know this is still possible. And I was going to report that it's imminent, but it seems like they have backed off some. But you can decide if you want to trust the government or not, right? So good to see all of you guys here. You guys have a good weekend as well. Wolf, Wolves, Wolf, Gort, Barney Brady. Shout out to the channel members that are hanging out tonight. Good luck in Pennsylvania, Mike. What's up, Pillbox Bunker? Nice to see you. Kurt 24. How's it going, Kurt? Yeah. Good night, Fluffy. And political. Yeah, political. We talked about Silence Essential on this channel so many times. So many times people from right within the gun industry are advocating for some of the most gun control because it's good for business a lot of times. And that's sad, but it's been known to happen. Good night, Harry Grimley. Nice seeing you, man. And Randy Smith didn't hardly recognize me. Is that in a good way, I hope? Thanks, Randy. Good night, Mike. Take it easy. And Barney Brady. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. And have a good one.